Alright, let's get right into this. Hello, welcome to the Myth 2 show. That's right, Myth 2 as seen on the Mandalore show. We're talking about this old Bungie game because I'm very fond of it and want an excuse to talk out loud. It's been too long, I'm sorry about that. Been a bit sick, but more just not quite feeling up to it, and yeah, I'm in the mood to talk about some stuff. I might do some Halo later tonight, but for the minute, I'm just gonna do this. And is this me wanting to talk generally, or is this me wanting to talk about Myth, or is this me wanting to talk meta about Mandalore? Nothing in particular on my mind. I'm just gonna do the usual thing. I get into a game, I have nothing in mind. I think, will I just talk about the game as it happens in front of me? And I figure that, as usual, I'm gonna get on some kind of in-my-head tangent that gets so interesting to me that I just completely forget about the game and play it without thinking about it. But while that hasn't happened yet, let's actually talk about Myth because it is cool. As you can see, this is a very pretty game. Mandalore talked briefly about that, but not in a very interesting fashion, just, oh, as you can see, the graphics are better, much improved from the first game. Look at the reflections, look at the shadow density, just, you know, everyone just, it's incredible. I remember when IGN were like the gold standard of bad talking about video games, and now I think it's really, really funny that basically every voice of the people on YouTube talks like IGN did in about 2008, where it's just these ridiculous made-up axioms which are the standard of everything for whether or not it's better. It's all just, yeah, we talk about the gameplay, the graphics, the sound, the presentation on a scale of, well, we don't use numbers because those are corporate, we just say good, or we use disgusting foodie language. Yeah, these are some really crunchy sounds, some really meaty graphics, just, you know, just people talk in disgusting ways because they're disgusting. I hate people. But I'm sorry, this is kind of going nowhere slowly, isn't it? Sorry, this is Myth 2. I was playing Myth 1 last time. The last one was actually Myth 1 recreated in the Myth 2 engine. Does that really matter? No, the interesting differences between them are in how they built the levels, I think, basically, and this is the first level of Myth 2, and it's maybe my favorite Myth level because it is not even remotely trying to be a game. It's just basically a story introduction scene presented within the game. It's pretty much impossible to lose in a way that I like. This whole thing is just establishing the plot, which is, we thought we lived in the nice peaceful times and now this town is being torn apart by zombies. And, you know, they can just say that in a text crawl, but instead we get to see it, and I like this kind of very lively and autonomous scene they've built. Lots of stuff is going on, it's very dramatic, and yeah, we can just mess around with it in our leisure pretty much. We have a job to do, but the odds of us actually failing are very, very small, and I love this level just as a way to like reacclimate myself. I played Myth 1, put it down for like a month or two, then played Myth 2, and this was a nice relearning level. That's another weird thing YouTube does. They just like to, one of the like weird made up axioms, a mark of a good game is weird teaching moments of like, okay, this level lets you get reacclimated to the weapons sandbox and the mechanics. Just like, no, I don't think that's really the intention. Maybe it is a bit, I don't think that makes it good. It's just something that I like. What this reminds me of, rather than like a tutorial, is it's more like, in a lot of like old first-person shooters of like the 2000s era especially, that period I'm very fond of, where games were kind of trying to rip off Halo in one way or another. Something that a lot of them did, which I always really enjoyed, was they would have like a setting up level in like a staging area or something where you just kind of walk around, get used to walking, and like, you know, you meet characters, the scene is established, it's, you know, like the story level, the warm-up level, whatever. I always really liked those in games and would be like disappointed when they stop, and when they have moments like that scattered through, I really like that. Like, I see them as like the reward for playing. Like, I get the part where it's suddenly like a visual novel or something. I'm not just killing waves of goblins. I really enjoy that, and this feels like that in a strategy game, which I think is really cool. just a level where you can just mess around and kind of take it easy. I really wish that was more of a thing in all kinds of games, but especially strategy ones. I think it's quite interesting because, as I may have said elsewhere, I think that a lot of the appeal of strategy games that never really got quantified well is that it's just cool to have this kind of world on a wire in front of you, which is, you know, behaving on its own rules and relatively autonomous. It's kind of a self-generating movie or fishbowl that I can mess around with. I prefer saying fishbowl to sandbox, one, just because I don't like to use words idiots use. They do ruin them for me, but also the emphasis on the fact that it's interesting because things are alive inside it. I'm not really interested in piles of sand moving around. Though, if you're old like me, you know there was actually a famous Flash game that was just playing with sand, which was actually quite cool, but I don't know, maybe someone could make an interesting game out of that. Like, there's my proposal for an indie game. Make Atelier, those Japanese games about being an alchemist. Combine that with the Hell of Sand falling game, and yeah, you know, you'll just be printing money if you can make that work. But, yeah, where was I? Yes, Fishbowl. By that I mean that, yes, this game is a kind of self-contained, autonomous system of moving parts, which, you know, the same way I talk about why the Marines in Halo are fun, this game, it feels like, I know that the way the AI works, it's just very elaborate scripting. They didn't actually create sentient zombies for this level, I'm sorry, but yeah, autonomy is kind of the essential word. It's the appeal of watching Fishbowl, the idea of like, oh, look at them go, they're just alive and doing their own thing without my input, that's fun. And yeah, it's like semi-Fishbowl, semi-strategy game, and this level is unfortunately the peak in the whole game of that Fishbowl element where you just watch stuff mess around. After this, it becomes very much a strategy game. Some Mexican on V or VST, one of those crappy 4chan boards, actually made a fairly astute observation that from looking at people play the game, it looks like 90% of the strategy is just kiting with ranged units, and he's right, unfortunately. Just look at my dwarf go in this game. Unfortunately, the optimal play in every situation is to kill the enemy without touching them. Myth is pretty good about that though. They make all of the ranged fighters very slow, so it's not optimal to just, like, no-brainer, just sit back and have these guys do everything. It's kind of a common failing of strategy games. You can hear I even hate that word, but for now we can use it. It's not disastrously wrong. It's kind of a great failing of those games that when you try to simulate and give a lot of control to every different kind of unit, being able to hit from far away tends to be really, really useful in these kinds of micromanaged, up-close, small-scale fights that strategy games tend to be built around. And it leads to very absurd scenarios where, you know, your battles are just like a dozen guys with swords chasing around some guys with bows, like a Benny Hill sketch, and eventually getting whittled down to nothing because they just can't catch them. That's your strategy scenario for epic strategy gamers. Masterminds like myself, I'm Sun Tzu because I just run away and do this. But yeah, the game does a decent job of not letting you just do that every level, but it does happen a lot, and unfortunately as well, the other thing is, later on in this game what you'll find is a lot of situations are built where it really punishes you for not having the right tool to approach a situation, and you fall into this spot where basically the game is going to kick your ass unless you bring the right thing to each fight, so it's like rock, paper, scissors, which you just keep re-rolling, like, that was the thing that shreds infantry, so reload your quick save and bring the archers or whatever, and yeah, the best levels are the ones which are very big and very chaotic, and you can kind of get away with making some less than ideal decisions. But the only way you can really make a game on this engine hard is just making it really punishing and just having it like delete you the moment you send a less than ideal arrangement of forces to a fight. Which basically means it's a hard loss the moment you don't do the right thing, which is generally not a very interesting tactical decision. It's just, you know, use your dwarf to blow up that enemy before it gets close to you, or you lose completely. Not that fun, but again, not disastrous. I think that the worst game with this is definitely the later Total Wars. Those are just abysmal. Again, something actually clever written on V about this is the green text about Legend of Total War. Legend of Total War here, saving your disaster campaigns. Now this player has made a disastrous decision. He has recruited a unit of infantry. We're going to delete that, hire an entire army of archers, and then just kill every battle in the game using heroes. That is basically exactly how the new Total War games work from my experience. Now, why I liked the old ones, even if they were kind of a mess you couldn't really strategize in, is that again, they were fishbowl. They were like Halo games almost in that, or like Bungie games in that they were very, very physical in the sense that like the units were made out of a very small number of polygons and they looked very solid and they had this like very physical feeling way of like crashing into each other, and they couldn't move through each other. They were very strict about having to actually make way for each other. Those little details just made it feel very much like you were watching autonomous little guys fight, and that was the fun factor for me. You know, the strategy was always frankly quite bad in those games. It's always pretty much coming down to this issue of, okay, just have your infantry stand in a line while archers hit them on the way in, and then send cavalry around the back and hit them in the back while they fight your infantry, and you win. That's pretty much the only way to play Total War. It was never a very interesting game on that level, but it was very, very interesting because, you know, for one, it's just cool to see hundreds of guys fighting on your screen. Okay, this is gonna end. Now, the screen is gonna get messed up for a minute, just bear with me. This is an old game. So, gee, that's some loud music as well. 1 minute, let me just load up a level that it's going to be fun to mess around with. Another thing just I want to point out briefly, if you can hear me over this massive volume spike, is, doesn't this sound a lot like the music in Halo? I found that really cool when I got into this. Gee, that's some loud music. Anyway, I hope the screen is recording properly again. Now, this is a very hard level that I'm gonna lose, but it's a cool one to just have on as B-roll while I'm talking. And another cool thing, just the cutscenes are in-engine in this game, and they look quite cool for that. I like in-engine cutscenes. Again, it sells the idea that everything is physical and real within its own rules. Now, where were we?
Wait here. I'll be out with the codex as soon as I find it.
Excellent. Now I'm going to get my ass kicked. This is a very hard level, but it should be fun to observe. Now, as I was saying, the thing that went wrong with Total War really was that, yeah, it was very much just the physicality fell away, and that was what was fun, watching the little men fight. And between that, there's also that just like Civilization-style addicting element of, you just build up stuff, and it's fun to invest in stuff, which grows your capacity to invest in more stuff. Just that power creep of invest in power to develop more power. That is inherently satisfying, and kind of to the point of what I've talked about in Halo and other things. Like, the most fun things video games can explore, you know, I'm not saying like they should do this, I'm saying the ones that succeed already do this, and we just don't really know how to talk about it, is power is really goddamn fun. That's what was fun about Total War, that sense of creeping power, that sense of like, I have so much this turn and I invest it and get dividends, and that's just going to keep paying out. That'll increase my capacity to get even more power in the future. And oh dear, I'm gonna die here so badly. But yeah, this idea of creeping power was very much the, again, not a strategic thing. It's extremely easy to run the overmap in Total War once you get even a tiny bit of meta knowledge, but it's really, really fun, so I didn't care, and that combination of just simple meta power creep on the overmap combined with fun little fishbowl men in the battlefields, that was a really, really fun way to make a game. Everyone, I knew a lot of people who had a lot of fun with that in high school. You didn't have to be a really great connoisseur of this stuff or really good at video games to have a great time with that. It's just the kind of fundamental stuff that's enjoyable no matter what context it's in. Build power and watch little virtual men kill each other. That's what we have video games for. And so yeah, this level, it's a kind of defense one. Really quite a fun scenario in a lot of strategy games. It's very high stakes, very interesting, and yeah, I think Halo was probably planning to have situations like this at some point. Like, it's funny, the level description for Assault on the Control Room makes it sound like it's a level like this where you're actually holding a position. And I would imagine that when they were making the game, they actually drafted it like that and then couldn't get around to making it that way. It was probably a description they wrote for a different level they just kept in for God knows why, but anyway, that's just a moronic piece of trivia I'm bringing up to fill air, because I forgot what I was on. Oh yeah, Total War, yes. Total War, really cool games, but oh dear, I'm trying to pay attention to this and dying.
Casualty.
Mel Gibson men run away while I kill those things. I said run away, Mel Gibson men.
Casualty.
Also, that noise is gonna drown me out, it's absurd. Ooh, got him. But anyway, yeah. This game, I think, was not really... As I've said in a lot of ways, a lot of things that were really good about old video games were never succeeded because we couldn't quantify the appeal. Like, idiots will say, oh, well, this is a strategy game, so we still have strategy games, so games like this existed. And they're kind of aware, honestly, in this case, but they're still idiotic the way they talk about it. When I say they, I basically mean... Well, really, I do mean everyone but me. There's a 4chan thread up about these games right now in which people are being very stupid. The Mandalore video was stupid. I'll talk about both in a moment. Let's start with, just the thought I had about 4chan in general, how they talk recently. Of course, it's a site made up of individuals. I can only speak to anecdotes, but the world is made out of anecdotes, as a certain friend says, friend of a friend, whatever. World is made of anecdotes. What I always see on V is you state your feelings, and then you make up an axiom which affirms how you feel about something, and then you get mad at people for being obviously wrong because they disagreed with an axiom. Never mind where it came from or how you came to it, it's an axiom, so anyone who disagrees with it is stupid. You say something like, Myth is good because it's a real-time tactics game, not a real-time strategy game. The idea of making buildings instantly is stupid, so a game that doesn't do that is better. So Myth is better than your favorite strategy game. There, that's like every fucking V post about strategy ever. Something in the spirit of that, where you just basically make up things which sound like arguments to get one over people you don't like. Because these are stupid people who don't know how to think. But that's kind of petty, I don't really need to get into that, it's not the most interesting subject, stupid people exist, we all know that. More interesting is what I was just saying, again, that question of language and losing what we don't know how to quantify. I think that, what's-his-face, Mandalore, was repeating this meme, kind of, in his video of... People love a few memes about this game in their attempts at explaining what it is. That was very cool. There are a lot of... People always talk about this game in memes, and I think the...
So, exactly how big is this library?
One sec, did I beat the level? Because I thought I was getting my ass kicked. Let's just appreciate the carnage here for a moment while I recover that thought I was just having. Anyway, oh no, more monsters are coming. I haven't won, I'm probably about to lose. But anyway...
Let's go!
Come on, dwarves, it's all gonna come down to you guys. Yes, people talk about this game in a couple of received memes, and the way those memes come out, it reminds me a lot of the Hiss meme phenomena, the history board of 4chan, and generally the history guy memes where, as a friend has said, the appeal of 4chan is explicitly that it's a hive mind, this idea that it's a kind of inclusive and democratic identity. You can be a kind of person without having to, you know, individually exercise any kind of character or brilliance. It's a very democratic and very inclusive site. Not a lot of people really understand how to talk about the appeal of 4chan on that level. The idea is that basically you can become 4chan is a cool internet guy identity which is impersonal, and it's open to anyone who can basically just say a few of the right particular things. Okay, we gotta rush these with my Mel Gibson men.
Casualties.
Yeah, that's a hard level. And sorry about those volume spikes, these games are a bit like that. But anyway, yeah, what is 4chan? It wasn't planned as this, but incidentally how it comes out. One moment, let's see. There's a nice failure screen where the bad guys killed my buddies. I'll get back to talking in a moment. Let me pick another nice level I can just kind of mess around on. How many of those great? Nah, the first game probably has better talking and wasting time levels. Let's do... Sorry, I'm just gonna... Let's just do the first level again. I really like this one. Sorry about the intermission there, but now we've got our guys set up and we can just smash them together and have fun here. Very easy first level. As you can see again, now that we're flicking back and forth, the first game isn't as nice looking, just like... I think the real problem is the color balance, like stuff like the grass just doesn't look very good. This is a kind of ugly shade of green compared to what they landed on in the second. But I'm not a visually oriented guy, I'm a speaker, I'm a writer, whatever. But anyway, as I was saying, yes, 4chan, it's very much this identity you just kind of lose yourself in, and you can't really fail out of it or be held accountable because of the anonymous thing. Again, this was all kind of patchwork and emergent. Nobody planned this. Moot didn't want this to happen. I'm sure he's quite disgusted with his creation. But yeah, so... It's very much this idea of like, okay, you know the right things to say, so you're in, and that's kind of the... Yes, the great example of that is the history guy. You know that when someone says Holy Roman Empire, you say... neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, and it's this kind of call and response, and you've affirmed that you're in. Does being able to say that mean you appreciate any of the history of the thing? To an intelligent person, no, but, you know, memes aren't about that, they're about belonging and signaling, and, you know, it's enough to prove that you're a history guy, which is a completely different thing to being a guy who actually appreciates history. It's its own niche, but whatever. And anyway, being a kind of like informed gamer guy is all about being able to say something that means about as much as saying neither holy nor Roman nor an empire in response to that stupid thing, which might as well be a paradox a video game character in the minds of most of the people who know of it. I'm back on the paradox thing. I don't like those guys, but I don't want to tangent and spiral out too much here. Where I was going is, yes, it's all just signals, and the way people talk about video games, it's really just like knowing a few signals to bring up in a few contexts, and Myth is very rich in signals with how people talk about it. People do like talking about this as like a weird, obscure e-girl aesthetic game. By that I just mean like cool, edgy person into old nerd stuff, but in a cool, lo-fi way, not a lame way. And you know, I say e-girl because it might look like the e-girls were the late adopters, but they were always the point. What is Sphere Hunter but the best e-girl? Not best as in coolest or whatever, just the most effective at realizing what the identity is meant to be. And I don't hate that person, it might sound like that, I don't mean to pick on them. They're just a funny example of a lot of different sociological phenomena. But anyway, how did that come up? Yes. What is liking a game like... Well, not even liking, sending signals about a game like Myth? You're just saying like, whoa, I'm the cool, edgy, old, lo-fi person who knows all of the games with their weird, crazy-ass, schizo, forbidden knowledge and lore. It's all just very rich in affectation and signaling and wanting to be cool to a certain kind of person. Very lame. And I'm finally back around to the point, I think. What are the signals with this game? You basically say, the big one is you say, I've been reading this in 4chan threads for about 10 years, I swear to God. Did you know this game was inspired by the Black Company? Whoa, crazy dark fantasy novel. I've got a really weathered copy on my shelf, which I display on Instagram, because I'm a cool e-girl. Look at my graphic t-shirts about the Black Company. Does Sphere Hunter own a shirt of that? Is he, she... Oh, I'm in trouble now, aren't I? Have they talked about the Black Company? I don't know. If they aren't gonna yet, they will. It's that kind of thing. I know that people into that scene talk about Gene Wolfe a bit. It's a similar kind of appeal. But anyway, where was I going? I was going to say... Yes, that's kind of the meme signal you send. You don't have to have read The Black Company. I have never heard anyone who has make an interesting connection between this and that. It's just something you say to affirm that you know about this game and you have stuff to say about it. You didn't just play it, you know about it because you know that it was inspired by the Black Company. That's above and beyond with your knowledge. Like, you know, if you're a paradox guy, a history guy, you don't just know that the Holy Roman Empire existed. You know that it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. Sorry, all this battling is happening over the top of my talking now. It's probably getting hard to hear me while I get to the point finally, but... Let's just watch the fishbowl happen now. As you can see, things aren't going well, but I'm still having fun. This isn't a game about winning, this is a game about watching little men in your computer kill each other. It's even written in the manual to Myth 1, or 2, one of them. They say that like the idea came from like rendering a lot of guys on screen and copying movies like Braveheart. You know, they weren't thinking like, we're going to make the most robust strategy game ever, it's going to be so balanced and people will play it forever in Korea. The idea was like, let's make a war movie in your computer. And I find that admirable. Something just came off that stand, doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm gonna pick another level just so the bloody... Just so that the music stops, because it's so loud. But yeah, the idea as well, I imagine, like, if we were to ask the Blizzard people, like, what was StarCraft meant to be, I doubt that strategy was really high on anybody's real priorities. You say strategy, but the idea was, no, this is going to be a kind of, like, junk science fiction movie, which is in your computer. It's for American genre-reading cretins, but the idea is still that it's going to be a story. Shitty and ugly and stupid, but, you know, that kind of thing. They had genuine multimedia aspirations, which I can respect, even if they had no real craft sense or taste. It really does need to be said at another point how goddamn ugly American genre works are. I really hate Americans. At least a certain kind of Americans. There's a certain kind of distinctly Americana aesthetic, which I find quite beautiful, and it was not coming out in 90s genre works. This is about as good as it got, and this is not the prettiest thing in the world or the cleverest. Bungie had a lot of brilliant ideas, but I don't think that aesthetically there is much of interest going on in Myth. It was always kind of, in my mind, a kind of technical exercise and filler entry in their works. Marathon, I think, had narrative ambitions, kind of in the lines of the postmodern novel. If you read my forum thread on that, it's kind of just an exercise in form. That whole meta thing of like, whoa, the guy in the game is like a gamer, like it's all meta, he's a guy who can keep respawning. And yeah, that's cute, it's not the most mind-blowing thing ever, but it's probably about as interesting as you can genuinely do such a thing in a video game, especially at the time, and, you know, commendations for that, even if on the whole I don't consider it the most interesting thing. These kind of formal exercises don't interest me that much, and yeah, on the actual mechanical level of, you know, the game's form, it's a vaguely interesting kind of meta story which would be considered like an okay VN if it came out in Japan, embedded within an okay shooting things science fiction game. It's perfectly alright. It's not something that'll blow your mind. It's probably best I actually think that Mandalore kind of did the world a favor in making his Daniel CC movie recaps of that game, because it's really something that is probably best served by just existing in that kind of descriptive form rather than people actually going back to play it, because it's just kind of mediocre to play. I've played a bit of Marathon, I didn't finish it, it's alright. I wouldn't recommend playing it too much, maybe just enough to get a feel, then read the plot. Really, it would of course better be served by something like a Hardcore Gaming 101 article. I actually respect the work they do there a lot. It's basically what these nostalgia critic type YouTube people do, where they remember it so you don't have to, but in a more utilitarian form, which is less pretentious and insulting in that they aren't pretending that they're, you know, it's not criticism. You know, what is criticism to a fucking gamer anyway? What they mean by that is consumer guide. Again, we're just repeating the forms of IGN like 20 years later. It's very absurd. But yeah, how the criticism form kind of emerged on YouTube out of this incidental patchwork that nobody planned is that the form is you basically make an IGN review crossed with a nostalgia critic video. You basically recycle the thing into a bad TV show using the language of consumer guides because that's what people associated with talking about video games on the internet. Again, because of IGN, and IGN were trying to do something very different. People used them as entertainment, but the idea was to be genuine consumer guides, so we have people, because they're dishonest and no one wants to say, I'm just recycling a video game to entertain you. There's this pretension of doing something more serious, and people are idiots, they don't understand real culture or critique, so they think, how do you talk about a game seriously? Well, the serious people were the consumer guides, so I'm a critic, so I say things like, the sound is really solid, it's a 7 out of 10, the visuals, they're sharp, they're crispy, they're crunchy, I give them an 8 out of 10, 8 goblins out of 10, but they get really meatier in the sequel. I'm really, real juicy in the sequel, so a 9 out of 10 in the sequel. Just very, very idiotic how this emerged. Pretty much by chance, we got the worst of both worlds, whereas Hardcore Gaming 101, props to them, that's a website if you don't know, and they basically just write descriptions of what old hard-to-play games were, like some obscure Japan-only Super Nintendo release or something. You could go dig up a translation, spend 20 hours playing it, but it probably only had a few interesting ideas you can appreciate on the level of, they tried that back then, that's kind of neat. And yeah, that thing is best appreciated just on the level of someone describing it to you, and let's be real, with a lot of these games, even if they are nice, you aren't really missing much if someone just gives you that, so I don't hold it against them. And yeah, my problem with Mandalore is not that, you're a secondary, you're meant to be playing the game, you didn't earn your membership into my club of people who know about Myth and say things like, did you know it was inspired by the Dark Company? No, my point is just that what little there is actually to appreciate within Myth is the visceral hands-on stuff, which, in addition to not showing you in his video and something you can't appreciate hands-on, Mandalore also basically doesn't talk about it at all. Again, the language to talk about this doesn't exist, so in the kind of syphilitic mind of a gamer, it doesn't exist if we don't have like IGN 2005 consumer guide language for it. So it's very sad that a lot of people feel like they get Myth now because they can say, did you know it was inspired by the Black Company? And they can repeat the plot. In number 2, Soul Blighter comes back, and so on. And there's a guy named Alric or something, but I played both of these games, and I probably remember less of the plot than someone who watched those stupid videos, because these are not plot works. This whole thing is just an exercise of creating fishbowl battles inside your computer. That is pretty much the only level I would say it makes sense to even care about Myth on. That, or if you care about the history of Bungie, and then there's the second issue of what does it mean to care about the history of Bungie. I would say that you care about them as people and you care about their works as expressive creations, as I'm always going on with about Halo. Understanding the history of Bungie on the kind of Wikipedia level of they made this game and then they made that game and then they made that one, and the weapon sandboxes get crunchier and the graphics get juicier and shinier, and just all that idiotic stuff that gamers say it's basically pointless. Again, like history memes, like, no, I'm not gonna read Gibbon, I'm just going to watch some YouTube videos and browse hiss and shitpost in Discords and create memes and signal that I'm a Roman history guy, and, you know, in like 6 years of that I won't have read a single book. I'm not saying like, oh, well, books are like your vegetables, you gotta like eat them because they're good for you, they get your membership. I just mean like, no, they're the efficient way of conveying what this stuff is actually about, and if you actually cared, you would want to look at them. And the fact that people like don't, I think, is pretty obvious proof that, you know, most things people are just... I say it completely seriously. With a lot of video games that I'm a fan of, I genuinely believe I am the first fan they have ever had. I think that most people don't know how to appreciate what are ostensibly extremely popular media. So this battle is spiking up. Can you even hear me over this chaos? Let's give that a second to blow over. Well, look at my guys go. Okay, sorry about trying to kind of yell at you over that chaos. I hope you didn't lose everything I was saying, but yes, the problem that I have with Mandalore and people who consider themselves like myth guys or whatever in general is, what does this actually mean to you? Like, Mandalore appreciates this game only along received lines, received memes of what it means to appreciate things. There are certain things you say about things that you talk about because it's a video game, and if it's a good one, which you appreciate, you say better adjectives in those places. Again, back to IGN, what does it mean to appreciate a game? You talk about the graphics, sound, presentation, gameplay, whatever the hell those moronic criteria they had were, and it's a high number or a better food adjective in 2023 if it's a good one, and a worse one if it's a bad one. But, you know, it's not... These aren't just, like, interchangeable toys. It doesn't make sense to say, like, okay, the graphics in Halo compared to the graphics in Bungie. Like, no, the visual elements of these works are intended to be completely different things, serving completely different ends in each case, and, you know, a game can be completely ugly, but completely compelling to look at or engage with. Because, you know, again, if you can read the human element behind something, these things really don't matter. And in the case of Bungie, again, there isn't actually a lot of, like, personal character put into this to appreciate. It's largely just actually a kind of toy, and this is actually, ironically, a game where it would make sense to talk about it technically, just not in the language we currently have. So the people who do talk about it technically, which is all of them because people are idiots, is worthless because they just basically try to talk about it like it's StarCraft, realize it's not, modify the language slightly, and are equally worthless. Like, what I was going to say before is people call this a real-time tactics game, and that really bothers me. It's just an idiotic thing to say that doesn't really mean anything. They say like, okay, well, a real-time strategy game is a game that has base building. Another thing, gamers and just stupid people in general love smashing words together. Base building, gameplay, just that kind of idiotic stuff. Just concepts become fused and totemic in their minds, and, you know, it's all the one inseparable thing. Base building, which really means an extremely specific thing, like basically a game which is a skin of Command and Conquer. This game doesn't have base building, so what is it? Well, we smash it into another totemic concept, that being real-time tactics, which means basically that this game is a game which doesn't have base building and has limited units and various other kind of whole concepts which you don't question or take anything from. It's just, again, descriptions, and this game doesn't get compared to a game that has base building because it doesn't have base building. So, you know, now you understand this game, you can say, it's real-time tactics because it doesn't have base building. I understand this game, I'm a thoughtful person. Dumb, everyone is dumb but me. Anyway, so this level is interesting because by fighting these guys who are basically the Flood from Halo, they share sound effects with them and do the same thing of exploding when they get close to you. They aren't really fun to fight, but they're interesting in how they basically turn a level into a puzzle for a moment, but again, that's something I kind of dislike with games in general, where they give up on being these kind of decorated VNs, where the idea is to just be a fun multimedia presentation of a story, and now it's like, okay, you're doing your toil, you're doing your chores, you don't get to have anything fun happen until you do this problem which we designed to be as obnoxious as possible. This bit is annoying. You get surrounded by these exploding gas bags that just loiter around the edge of your range, and you have to kind of awkwardly probe back and forth until you get through them.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, I was saying, the language people use to talk about myth is very unhelpful and boring. People just talk about it like it's a mod for StarCraft, basically. It's got gameplay, it's got story, it's got graphics, it's just something that fits into an IGN review framing. Very, very dumb. And that really fails to grasp anything that was going on. And what was going on here, I'm not saying you missed the story, because what story there is, I would actually say if you try a story analysis of this game, you are basically doing it wrong. And I don't mean to speak ill of the guy, I don't remember his name, but there was an effort I consider kind of admirable, even if misplaced. There's this kind of lore-based Let's Play of Myth on YouTube, and I think the format is a good idea, where he like plays the briefing, talks about everything going on in each level, then plays it in up to a good standard and just shows you the whole game top to bottom, and I appreciate the premise of that, just
right away.
Myth is, again, like almost a placeholder story where nothing in it means anything, and the idea of this game having lore is almost laughable because of how stock everything is. Like, there are the elves, and we call them the, you know, some like Celtic word for elf because Bungie like that stuff basically, and looking for more meaning in anything in this game beyond Bungie kind of liked it that way and were just kind of building a nice little frame for this combat engine they built. You are wrong, unfortunately, if you're reading more into it than that. It's something I say, it might sound hypocritical at first. I say generally most people are completely unwilling to read creative intentions into anything, but in the case of Myth, it's actually backwards, where I think reading it correctly and actually trying to discern the intentions of the creator, a lot of it you will have to conclude actually doesn't matter. It's kind of the opposite of a lot of what the opposite of most good games, where if you actually care about what Bungie were trying to do here, you will ignore the story, I believe. Mean as that might sound. If you actually appreciate them, you're going to try to talk, as I do, in depth about, okay, what does this game do that's really novel? Where is the above and beyond effort in which we can see unique creative intentions? We can see a lot of unique stuff in this game in, you know, again, the detail of the ground and how much physical behavior is coded into that, how lively the units and their interactions are. This game, if you actually appreciate it, you appreciate that it's like the best goddamn like physical combat engine for a strategy game ever built. Again, we can make things more technically complex now, but as I say in various places, I don't know if I have in a video, but I write this a lot, conceptual progress is more important than technical progress. I actually just said this today to someone in the context of film, particularly Labyrinth, the Jim Henson film, which is about puppets, if you don't know. It's a puppet special effects film. And one of the most elaborate effects in that movie is actually men just doing hand puppets with their hands, literally. It's like a Jean Cocteau film. It's quite an impressive effect. Again, what you can think of is generally far more important than the technical capacities at hand. You can make a more interesting film with just a camera and people than you can with like a Marvel render farm. And the same applies here. You can make a more interesting strategy game with, you know, like Bungie's crappy 90s computers than you can with all the Unreal Engine tools in the world that we have access to today. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is. And anyway, again, sorry if I'm kind of circling around this point. I don't like to script or anything right now, so this is just how my thoughts come out. So, yes, as I was saying, conceptual progress. If you want to talk about and actually appreciate Bungie in the context of this game, if you want to kind of meet their minds and understand who they were and what they were doing, you really have to appreciate this element of physicality. And again, I'm almost sorry for this guy on YouTube who made his I wanted to
Casualties.
show that off at least once. I'm almost sorry for this guy on YouTube who made this, like, lore-based series for Myth, but, you know, he wasted his time, like, okay, we can speculate on, like, what this town was and who the people in it were and what its strategic importance was for the war between the light and the dark, but
Sir?
if you're talking about Myth on that level, you don't get Myth. And the first time this point really came to me was in the context of Silent Hill, a series of games I'm very fond of. I remember in a thread on a forum, I think this was at Paradise Hotel 51, very nice site, the lore, there was this thread of games with good stories, I think, and I was talking about how I'd recently played and enjoyed Silent Hill, and the level on which I enjoyed it is one that I've seen basically nobody talk about anywhere, which is basically that it's a kind of Brian De Palma-esque Stephen King-like story of kind of... It's one of those stories of frustrated human vitality, which the Japanese are very fond of. It's taking cues, obviously, from Carrie and The Fury, but also Akira and similar stories in Japan, The Ring. A lot of people, I don't think, realize that The Ring is basically the same story as Akira and Silent Hill as well. It's not too vocal about it. Whoops.
Casualties.
It's not vocal and explicit about it, but if you can read even a shred of subtext in your media, I think it's rather obvious that that's what's going on. And anyway, someone links in the thread like, yeah, someone thinks they're agreeing with me, but they're not. They don't understand what I'm saying. They say like, yeah, a lot of discussion of Silent Hill on the internet isn't that good, but here's a really good elaborate appreciation analysis of Silent Hill, and he links me this text document made by like a Russian fan or something, and it's basically the same thing as what this Silent Hill fan, as what this Myth fan had done, where he was basically confusing loads of incidental detail for appreciation, and it's this mistake of kind of the, I don't know what you want to call this, like lore brain, high school English brain, whatever. This idea that like, once you have enough mass of like incidental, superficial detail, you understand the thing or appreciate it. Like, what is Silent Hill? Sorry, this game is loud sometimes. Let me just get to the point. What this Silent Hill analysis was basically a collection of every single symbol in Silent Hill and an explanation of what it is. Like, oh, well, this is a mark from this culture or this religion scratched into a door, and it's a symbol of this, which might mean this. And that's literally the entire document, just like page after page of, this is a picture of this, which might mean that. And that is a very, very boring and ultimately pointless exercise of, you know, what does that ultimately mean when you have the name of every single symbol in work? So, this is getting almost comical how much stuff is exploding while I'm trying to talk. Sorry if I'm hard to hear again. I heard that under the Halo video. I'm trying to be more conscious of that. But I also don't edit because, again, a big part of this is just how easy it is for me. I intend to edit in the future, but we'll get there when I feel more confident and like I have a better idea of what I want to say. Right now I do these basically as vlogs, and I know at least one person enjoys listening to the whole things, and you can use them like vlogs if you want. You can use them as podcasts. You can actually look at me interacting with the games if you find that interesting. I really don't care. I do it for my own sake. It's fun to pull ideas out of my head, see what comes to me when I prompt myself with a game right in front of me. Now, let me just finish that thought I was on. Yes, the Silent Hill analysis, it was of a kind with that one Myth analysis I saw. Very misguided, basically, of like, understanding Myth is not a matter of like understanding the names of the inconsequential and interchangeable towns in the lore or the names of the characters, because those aren't parts which Bungie put themselves into. The most interesting part is how much references to old Celtic mythology there are, but they're just name drops. They don't really become interesting until Halo, where those old references to mythology are suddenly placed in a context where we can actually think about what they meant beyond, oh, I guess they like that thing. Like, no, it's very... As I've said before, and I'll go into at much more focused length at some point in the future, in Halo these references mean things very specific. In Myth, none of it really does. It's all just kind of window dressing, basically. And if you can't tell,
All right.
it's kind of the mark of someone who is trying and not succeeding to not be able to tell the difference between window dressing and what is actually kind of humanistically important to the creators. And yeah, that's kind of the failure of that Silent Hill fan and that Myth fan where, yeah, just, you can know the name of every detail in this. I don't remember what the elves are called. That guy I'm sure does, but does he appreciate Myth better than me? This might sound rather conceited, but I would say no, definitely not.
Here they come.
I think he has basically completely failed to understand why this game exists or why Bungie make games. And I think that, yeah, I'm one of the very few, if any, people who actually has a halfway working idea of why these games exist and can actually talk about them as art in that barest sense of like, okay, this is a creative work, it exists for a reason, we can actually read the character of a person through it. And sorry if that's a bit of a kind of deflated ending, I got distracted by the game stuff going on. Okay, I'm gonna sacrifice guys to get past these. I can't puzzle out an intelligent solution to this, and I'm gonna wrap up the video in a moment.
Got it.
This guy, Morrow, his sacrifice is appreciated. Go activate that bomb, man. You get these ones. Round.
Casualty.
It's a fun little game, isn't it? But anyway, yes, very few people appreciate Myth or anything, and it's funny, the framing of that 4chan thread I found on this, it was very absurd. It was something like, is this going to lead to a resurgence of interest in Myth? Like, this isn't an ongoing TV show, there is no Myth community, like, what does it mean for people to be more interested in something that already exists? Like, what, you get more social capital for being a Myth guy, and again, like, repeating your memes of like, okay, more people know what Myth is, so that means I get more social capital for being able to say, did you know it was inspired by the Black Company? And I swear to God, like, half of the posts in that fucking V thread are about that exact line of anti-thought. It is so fucking... Jesus. 4chan is like a zoo to me now. I just go there to, like, study Mexicans, basically. And it's just funny, the shit they're constantly repeating without fail every time. Every subject is just ground down to this moronic level of, did you know it was inspired by the Black Company? Or in the case of Marathon, did you know it's like House of Leaves? It's like, it's all meta, it's about being a guy who can respawn. Ugh, so goddamn boring. But yeah, sorry, just, I've been circling this for 10 minutes and getting distracted. To bring it back around to form, what does it mean to appreciate Myth? It does not mean you know the name of this town we're fighting in. That is not the part that meant anything to Bungie. Your appreciation of the game is not richer if you know that. It doesn't mean anything in the most basic sense. I can't imagine an intelligent person caring about that detail. It's just, you can learn it, but I can obviously just ask why, and there's no real good answer. You're just a lore addict Brandon Sanderson fan who just collects junk data because you're basically an idiot. Yeah, we did it! Shame about Morrow, he didn't make it. I'm gonna just like fire up another easy level real quick, just so I can wrap up a couple of thoughts I've got. This might be a long video, vlog, whatever. But you know, we're back, it's fun, isn't it? We're back in form. Loud music is back. Let's let the anime cutscene play real quick. It'll probably be smashed into the corner of the screen, but there we go, this was made by that nice Japanese studio. Look out! There we go. They could only afford like 2 minutes of animation, but what they got was nice. And I like that transition from animation to this. I think when games do that well, it reinforces this idea of like multimedia, like this is a kind of story presented on multiple fronts, and the game just happens to be one in which they can do certain parts of it well. I'll talk more about Bungie and multimedia in the future. I've actually been reading some of the old Halo novels. When I feel like shit, I just consume a lot of junk media to pass time. well, not junk, just simple, accessible, and Halo novels are very much like that, very easy and simple to read. Multimedia thoughts I'll get back to, but sorry, I did it again. I was talking about my essential point and got off it. What does it mean to appreciate myth, or appreciate any work? You basically appreciate the intentions of the people behind it, and you can read people through it, or if you're a real nerd like me, you'll appreciate people appreciating the thing. It just becomes this kind of kaleidoscope of human interest in which you just watch people watching myth and failing to watch Bungie through myth. That's why video games are interesting to me, really. It's just, I'm studying the human animal here. It's just a means of looking at people, and for the most part, I'm very disappointed in what I find, but there's a lot of nuance in how people can be idiots about something. And again, just, there are people who claim to understand Silent Hill who fail to recognize the most basic subtext behind it. And there are people who claim to be into myth who fail to appreciate the most basic elements of it. And again, there's no real subtext here. There's no crazy schizo plot in which the whole thing is a metaphor for being some nerd at a computer. It's just a game about smashing little toy soldiers together, and that manages to be lost on people still. They try to read it like it's a bloody... I'm sorry, let me just recollect my thoughts. They try to read it like a Brandon Sanderson novel, like the idea is that you get it when you know the name of every character and so on. No, you get this element of Bungie when you can understand why a game is more fun if the hill is physically modeled, and your guys walk up the hill, and that changes the way that an arrow flying has to arc through the air to hit them. That is what this whole era of Bungie is about, just building up the physical foundations which will allow them to make a more interesting work-like marathon in the future. What is Halo? Halo is marathon plus myth. And which part of myth was really essential in its realization, I think was lost on everyone. So our man Mandalore, he is going to probably make a Halo video eventually, and he will be wrong on pretty much every front, I can already tell. He will not really be able to talk about the physicality because IGN didn't, and he only knows how to basically take orders from IGN, talk about graphics, gameplay, presentation. And on the thematic front, he'll emphasize the crazy schizo, whoa, it's the marathon symbol, I'm going insane from this forbidden knowledge. And he won't talk about the subtext because, on one hand, is he smart enough to see it? I doubt it, but it's not impossible. And then if he sees it, will he talk about it? No, because understanding this shit will basically have you sent to YouTube jail because, again, Halo is basically the most right-wing game ever made outside of Japan. It's very, very funny, very, very interesting how rich and elaborate it is and how severe its picture of the human condition is relative to what it's okay to say in our time, so you are not going to get an accurate picture of the inner world of Bungie by watching his video, but we will get an accurate picture of his inner world, even if obscured deliberately on his part. We will be able to see how a kind of mid-wit idiot who never really learned how to appreciate art talks about a kind of really elaborate piece of American multimedia right-wing pop art. That's going to be interesting to see. I look forward to his take on it. I know it will be bad, but how it is bad will be very interesting, and I'll probably make a thread on the forum or something about that. Maybe we'll be making a video as well. If I could have been bothered to make this the day after his video, maybe I could have addressed him directly, parasited some views off of him, but I couldn't be bothered again. I was sick. I'd probably have been coughing the whole time. That wouldn't have been the nicest thing ever, would it? And again, I've been just as I prophesied I would. I thought I might go into this with no ideas and maybe just talk about the actual game in front of me for once. Instead, I just end up talking in my own tangents, my own little world for a whole time, and the game becomes backdrop to me. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video in which I just talk about how myth plays, but that is not this video. Also later today I might talk about Halo, and you might think, Maybe he'll talk about the game there, he's been talking about other stuff today. No, I probably have a mental backlog that's hours long of stuff I could talk about within Halo, which isn't the game Halo, so yeah, maybe I'll make a video on that tonight, look forward to it, and when I'm in there, don't worry, I have lots of things that aren't the game to talk about. We might finish level 4, maybe even level 5, we'll see how I feel. Now, because this is a game records funny, I can never be certain. I really hope I haven't been talking into the void for the last hour. We'll call it here, and hopefully I'll have this thing ready to upload in a minute for you. Thanks for watching.